Hello, my name's Simone and I'm a counselling psychologist. And in the last 6 months, I came out of a relationship that meant a lot to me. And there's been something I've been sitting with since that I want to talk to you about today. And it's this question of what we're prepared to do in the course of love. In schema therapy, there's a coping mode called the compliant surrenderer. And the word surrenderer does the hard work there because you're not fighting what you've learned, the schema, and you're not avoiding it. You're kind of giving into it. And you end up organising a part of yourself around it. So if the belief underneath the schema is my needs are too much, or I am too much, or I will be left if I ask, or love has to be earned, compliant surrender is you agreeing, you accommodating. So what this means is you might go quiet, you might make yourself easy, you will take breadcrumbs and tell yourself it's a meal. And I think this pairs in a lot of people with a personality that's quite high in agreeableness. So you're warm, maybe conciliatory, you genuinely don't want to cause anyone any trouble. And I also want to be really clear, because I've worked with a lot of men who give and give and give. This is not essentially female, but it is kind of conditioned into women, because women are trained into the relational labour. We are the ones who are supposed to notice, to smooth, to maintain, to hold the emotional weather of the house. So when your nervous system reaches for appeasement, it's actually reaching for something that as women, we've had a lifetime of practice in. So anyway, I went out for a walk with a girlfriend recently, and she was telling me about a relationship that had ended, one that meant a lot to her. What she was describing was a relationship that was actually, it sounded to me like quite low effort on his part. And there was also a subtle kind of negging of her going on. I didn't hear a culture of celebration of her, just this kind of slow chipping away of all of the parts of her that she actually loves, and that actually all of her friends love about her, by the way. The parts that make her her. And as we're walking along, she's telling me how much she misses him, how much she yearns for that life with him. And, we're both in our 40s, and there is a particular ache in that. And so anyway, I'm listening to her and I'm thinking, what is she actually missing here? Because it's not him. I think she was missing what she was going to become in his presence. And Christopher Bollas writes about the transformational object, the other person who isn't loved for who they are, but for the change they promise to sort of work in you. And that, I think, is a very early wish. That's an infant wish, an experience of like a caregiver as the one who might alter your entire state, who can take you from an unbearable to bearable form. And when we're yearning like that in adulthood, we're often not yearning for a person. We are yearning for a transformation that we were maybe promised and we didn't get. And one of the main responses to a child who didn't get attunement, or who maybe had a demanding or a critical or withdrawing parent, is that you learn something quite specific. You learn that if you keep trying hard enough, you will get the approval that you crave. Well, not that you'll get it, that you could get it, that it's available, but only if you get it right. And Freud calls this the repetition compulsion. And I think that gets misread as, or miscalled, like self-sabotage. So people might say, oh, well, she's just addicted to drama. She likes the chaos, or she likes bad boys. That's not it. Repetition compulsion is an attempt at mastery. So you return to the unfinished thing. You go back to the situation that you couldn't solve as a child, and you try to solve it again, but this time with adult resources. You say, this time I'll be patient enough. This time I'll be undemanding enough. This time they might turn towards me. And Fairbairn takes it even further. And this is the part I find really moving, because he describes what he calls the moral defense. So like a child can't survive the knowledge that the person they depend on is not safe. It's unbearable. So the child does something extraordinary. They actually take the badness into themselves, because it's better that they are the problem. Because if they're the problem, then they might be able to fix it. This is all unconscious, by the way. And then the world still has a good object in it. And then as children, we sort of carry that. We walk into our adult relationships with the same arrangement kind of already installed. So if relationships don't work, we say, well, that must be something I haven't corrected for. Fairbairn also describes the object that splits, and I've talked about splitting before. So splitting is like into the exciting one and the rejecting one, the one who tantalizes and the one who withholds. And the tragedy is that that's the same person, and the withholding is what makes the tantalizing so potent. You're not actually attached to the good moments. What you're attached to is the oscillation, the volatility in the system, right? And it doesn't always come from childhood. So I'll explain what I mean, because a lot of people who hear this will be thinking, well, my childhood was actually fine. My parents were loving and consistent. Sometimes it's adolescence. Sometimes you might meet somebody at 15, 19, 23 who treats you increasingly badly with that hot, cold, push-pull, intermittent reinforcement, and that can do enormous damage to a psyche that is still forming, because intermittent reinforcement is not a metaphor. It's actually a schedule. I've talked about it before in the trauma bond. It's the most powerful reinforcement schedule we know of, much more powerful than consistent reward. Because when you can't predict the good thing coming, you don't reduce your effort, you actually escalate it. The wanting gets louder, not quieter, because dopamine. And the cruel part is that we're taught to read intensity of longing as depth of love. So the more unpredictable someone is, the more we ache and burn for them. And the more we ache, the more we're convinced it must be love. It's not. It's literally just a schedule. And I need to flesh out what actually happens in the body here, because, I like to talk about the body and the nervous system. So let's talk about fight and flight. Everybody knows those, and obviously disconnection. But when the threat is your attachment figure, when the person you are frightened of is also the person that you need, you can't fight, you can't flee, you can't play dead, because those would cost you the bond. So the system actually reaches for a fourth option, which is appeasement, or fawn, it's sometimes called. So you make yourself agreeable, you make yourself useful, that's what I did. You make yourself small enough so that the threat resolves. And appeasement is not weakness, it's actually a highly sophisticated survival strategy. And for a lot of us it worked, it got us through. But look at what it costs to run it. You become exquisitely attuned to the other person's state. You're scanning the face, the tone, the length of the pause before they answer, the temperature of a text message. Your entire sort of attentional field is pointed outward at them in a constant state of low-grade sympathetic arousal that never quite discharges. And you can run that for years. And then eventually the system can't sustain it and you will go into shutdown. That flatness, that exhaustion, that brain fog, which is what I mean when I say I have been rinsed of my resources in relationships. And what I really want you to take home is that when your nervous system is organised around another person's state, what you lose is the channel to your own state. Interoception goes offline and you genuinely stop being able to answer the question, how do I feel about this? Not because you're avoiding it, but because the equipment has been repurposed. And this is what I mean when I talk about disembodiment. It's not a mystical idea. It's a nervous system that's been trained over decades to read somebody else's body instead of its own. And Winnicott would say this is where a false self takes over. So compliance becomes the basic gesture, the present version that keeps the environment stable. And the true self, the real kind of you, goes into hiding where it's safe, where nobody can reach you, including eventually you. Now, I'll share my little part in this because I know you like me to disclose. One of my great strengths is that I work very hard on my relationships. I will give people an awful lot of rope because I believe in relationships and I believe in love. I do. And I'm not going to apologise for that. But that has also meant that I have stayed an awful lot longer than I should. That I have been rinsed of my resources. That I've spent years working very hard to get another person to respect me and kind of meet me, as if respect was something that you could earn through sufficient effort, like a wage. Ugh. And so here's what I've been thinking about. And it's the thing I most want to gift you today. I think we should not interpret too much, because there's a point at which interpreting another person's behaviour stops being compassion for them and it actually becomes a lack of self-respect for you. And I want to be honest, it's a particular hazard for me as a therapist because I can formulate, right? I can tell you exactly what happened to that man and why he does that and what it protects him from. And every bit of it might be true. And it makes not one bit of difference to what it's like to live with. The formulation eventually becomes the thing that keeps me in the room, kind of like a hostage. So what I'm practicing now is holding both. Yes, other people have their own lives, their own histories, their own reasons. And is this an isolated event or is this a pattern that is unfolding? Because isolated events we can tolerate. Withdrawal, disappearing acts, irritability, confusion. People have bad weeks, some people have bad years, fine. But when it becomes a pattern, we have to meet that person at the level of their behaviour, not at the level of their potential, not at the level of their explanation, but their behaviour. And it is at that point that we need to get curious about the impact. Now, I've done quite a few posts on defensiveness, and so many of you have written to me saying, how do I deal with my partner's defensiveness? I feel so alone, I feel so lonely, I feel isolated, we can't solve anything together. And what I want to say to you is this: stop asking what you can do about their behaviour. Ask what their behaviour is doing to you. What does this do to my body? How do I feel in the hours after we speak? What role does this pull me into? And do I even like who I am in that role? Because if you have come from a background where you were taught to tolerate, to be patient, accommodating, agreeable, compliant, maybe where you learned that speaking would go worse for you than staying silent, then the question is going to feel almost impossible to answer. And that is not your failure. That is the fawn response doing exactly what it was built to do. But it's the only question that's actually yours, right? What's the impact on me? And I'm saying all of this because I am in a place now where I'm actually starting to sort of put my head up, and I'm thinking about what it would be like to date again. And in schema therapy, Jung calls that there's a kind of chemistry, a schema chemistry, that click, that immediate sense of going like, oh, I know you. And I think we can be taught that that's mostly like a reliable signal of something good, but it's not. It's just recognition. It's just the shape of an old room, that instant attraction. So I'm practicing something slower. I'm going to watch for patterns rather than building a story. And I'm going to ask myself honestly, what does this mean to me? And I also want to say thank you for those of you who've been so patient with me. I haven't posted in a while because I've moved house. And it's been a lot. And I'm really sorry for the absence, but I'm back. And I will be much more consistent from here. Okay. Take care of you. Bye.